right. In the world of sports right now, everybody is about the need for speed. Everyone wants to be fast, but many are doing speed training the wrong way. So today we're talking with Laura Stark, performance coach and sprint mechanics expert, on what most athletes are getting wrong about speed and what you should be doing instead. So, Laura, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and you have a lot of background. We could go like for minutes on, or go on about like your experience, but I know that in allowing you to speak, you'll kind of speak your experience by what you share and everything. So yeah, that's why I was like, let's just get right into it.
Sure.
So first off, I think a lot of athletes, they think they're training speed. They think that they are getting faster just because they're running more, just because they might be doing a couple drills at home. What's the difference between like running and actually training for speed?
Yeah, I think first is to define like what do you need to get better at, right? So when I say speed, I can mean multiple things, which is why I always, ask those questions to my athletes of like, okay, well, tell me what you're actually talking about. Like, describe in the game situation, because speed can be forward speed, it can be acceleration typically, it can be top end speed, it can be agility, it can be stopping actually. So it's kind of defining what are we trying to work on, and then how do we get there? So having a game plan before just going and training hard, where I see a lot of people like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go work really hard. And sometimes working really hard in the wrong direction can actually hinder you because you're already training so many hours. And so like rest is more important than working hard in the wrong direction. So it's really about having like a clear vision and path.
Okay. So when we talk about like speed drills, we'll go kind of big picture first. Like what makes a speed drill effective?
Again, that comes back to what's the goal, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, taking somebody who has never trained with me before, first of all, we need to be speaking the same language. We're going to start over talking about like, what are the 4 pillars of running? What do these different terms that we use mean? Just so we're speaking the same language. So before I even have them run, we're analyzing an A run, like some A drill, and just getting on the same page and kind of seeing what might pop up in your run. And then from there, it's like, okay, cool, let's go into a 10-yard sprint. Let's see what we look like. And it's really breaking apart just 10 yards. And typically I see something in the first 2 steps, and that's the thing that we need to talk about. So to be effective, it's going back and doing the thing. So let's say, for example, hip projection, or how like your displacement, essentially how far your hips are moving forward, is your thing. So how are we going in and fixing hip projection? And we're going to go fix it by oftentimes doing drills where your feet don't even leave the ground. You don't need to run 10 yards over and over and just practice bad habits. You need to go in and change movement patterns. So understand what's the movement pattern that needs to be changed. How do we do it? Again, kind of go same back to like, what's the goal? How do we accomplish it?
Yeah. So let's unpack a couple of those things. First off, we'll go more the bigger picture of the 4 pillars, because that's something I saw in your content, but I want the listeners to kind of hear how you break those down.
Yeah, so this is something that I learned from my mentor, and it just like stuck. And at the time, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had this when I was a college track athlete, because I was looking for answers, and there are answers, but nobody knows them. So our 4 pillars of running are spinal alignment, hip projection, switch, and stiffness. So spinal alignment is how straight your spine is, but a lot of times, it's obvious like if you have really bad posture, but I'm looking at the neck, I'm looking at the hips, and if there's rotation there. Hip projection, what I talked about earlier, it's like make sure you're moving your hips forward. If the goal is to go that way, your hips got to move. Obviously, that can change, right? If you're jumping, it's still hip projection. It's just in a different direction. So hip projection. Switch is how you switch from left to right. We don't want to step, but we want to switch. And stiffness is just having like the pliability. It's strong and stiff off the ground. You're hitting the ground's not hitting you. You don't want to like collapse and be weak into there.
Do you mind expanding a little bit more on the switch part? Because I think I want to hear more, but I think listeners are probably like, wait, define that a little more.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the pattern of their switch. Sometimes what you can see is, are they pausing? So let's say right's on top, left's on bottom. Are they pausing before they switch? That's wasted time. Or do they start putting one leg down sooner than they're picking that leg up? Again, that's wasted time. That's just improper movements. So it's about timing. It's about, rhythm, coordination, all of those things, and maximizing how quick you are from one leg to another. Of course, sometimes we slow that down because we need to slow down and work on these things.
So when we talk about the 4 pillars, and then you mentioned those first 2 steps being really key, what are some common mistakes that you see in those first two steps?
I think hip projection is
Yeah.
one of the big ones. That's why it popped up. Another one is going to be foot placement, just where they're striking. And this just goes hand in hand. Sometimes it's like, well, what came first? But, where they're striking on their foot and also in relationship to their hips. So a lot of times, for example, you'll see somebody reach out and they're heel striking. And if you draw a straight line down from their hips, their foot's in front of their hips. I'm sorry, their foot is in front of their hips. So with that, now they're pulling their body over and then pushing the ground, where we really want to get our hips moving and then strike backwards, but our hips never stop traveling, right? So as we're taking the split second to strike backwards, our hips are continuing to move, and we're in a position to just push, not pull, then push.
Okay. What about in those first few steps? I know one thing that I've seen when I've watched some coaches doing speed drills is your posture in terms of, the spinal alignment, but also where your head and your eyes are. Like, how important is that to speed?
I think it varies. I think in track, 100%, that's really going to matter, right? Because track is, it's very clear. The gun goes off and you go. Other sports will change, because sometimes you don't have to go at 100%. Sometimes you're not going forward. So again, with track, it's always 100%. It's always forward. The goal is to finish as fast as possible. Sometimes on a soccer field, you're not actually trying to finish as fast as possible. Sometimes you're not trying to accelerate. Sometimes you're going right or left instead of forward. So it can be important, and I do slow it down because I want them to have that understanding. But as we progress and we really master the basics, then we start adding what I call chaos into it, right? So a soccer game, for example, is full of chaos. You don't know what's going to happen. Unlike track, you know what's about to happen.
Well, yeah, and I think maybe what I've seen too is it's a lot of it tends to be more the football speed training, where it's like, okay, they're training for the 40-yard dash, so in a sense it's similar to track.
Exactly. It matters.
Yeah, but then the thing with football though is you also have to learn like change of direction and some of those things too. So like when you train speed, do you train those types of things, or do you leave that to more of the football specific like trainers?
Good question. So let's talk about football specifically. If I'm training a football player, it's again, what is the goal? Do they have a combine coming up? Well, then maybe we need to work on some starts. Not maybe, we do need to work on some starts, how good you are. And even track versus, a 40, it's like a 4-point versus a 3-point stance. So just that one arm coming up. But understanding, again, what's the goal? So if they have a combine and they really need to drop their 40 in order to get into college, that's a very important goal. And we need to train acceleration in the 40. Now, if I'm training you to be better on the football field, unfortunately it changes, right? The 40 doesn't always exactly translate. So then at that point, it is about speed and performance. And my job as a performance coach is to make sure that they're healthy and efficient movers on the field. I obviously know some movements of the football field, but when it comes to like, you want to work on receiver drills or tight end drills or quarterback drills or DB, whatever, like this position specific stuff, I leave that to the football trainers.
Yeah. I was just curious on like some of the, like, for example, when you talk about wide receivers, like, they may need to do a route, like how do they apply speed to those types of routes rather than just running? Because they're not just running straight. They're doing, posts, they're coming back in, the slants.
A lot of acceleration work. How quick can you stop and go a different direction? Because they're all fast, and obviously more speed is good, but really, for the receiver, it's not just about speed typically. I mean, unless you're an outlier. There's some people that are just so much faster than everyone. Very rarely, but sometimes those people just have speed and it's just like, go, I'll get out there. Now, for the majority of people, it's really about training that stop, that stick, that deceleration, so that you can get in and get out really quickly and healthy.
Yes. So I want to unpack that a little bit more, because when, again, football, they need it. Baseball, they need it trying to get to base. They got to slow down at some point. And then you've got soccer, basketball, any of those types of like sports where they're running constantly. Yeah, there's a lot of change of direction and that deceleration. What are some common mistakes that you see just in speed training in general when it applies to the deceleration?
I would say the common mistake I see is people not actually training deceleration, people jumping straight into the fanciest agility drill ever. And so it's like they're doing 10 seconds of like, do, and I can't find one thing that they're actually getting better at, because the point of agility is really stop and start. and do that from multiple movements and multiple directions and be able to be strong and healthy in all those directions. So when people are saying, oh, I need to work on my agility, and then they go do a 10-second drill, no, these drills last 5 seconds, maybe. That would be long. A lot of times it's 3 seconds. How quick and efficient and strong can you be in those 3 seconds and in those specific movements, as opposed to hitting like 100 cones? That you're not going to find that.
Okay. So what I want to do, we'll get into the drills that we definitely need to lean more on, especially when it comes to speed and agility. But I want to let you kind of share your hot takes on a few different things, and I'll just leave it open-ended. So the first one is agility ladders.
So I think that agility ladders have a time and place. A lot of times people abuse them, or they want to master agility ladders. And something I mentioned this mentor earlier, something a mentor used to say is like, don't become a professional driller. And a lot of people become professional drillers. And speed ladders, again, how are you using it? And there's a good time and place. I love a good 3 to 5 minute warm up on the ladder, because it's teaching ground contact, it's building stiffness, it's building like your speed off the ground, it's building rhythm, timing, coordination. There's a lot of good things that you can get from that, or also from a line on the ground. So I don't think you need the fanciest tool, and I don't think you need to be there for 20 minutes being the fastest in the ladder. Because, I mean, you moved 3 yards at the end of the day and took a million steps, and that's not really what we're trying to accomplish. The accomplishment was the same thing I just mentioned with the line on the ground contact, stiffness, rhythm, timing, coordination, just building that like preparation to go move. And the agility ladder, you're not moving enough.
Okay, that's a good one. I wanted to hear, and it's also, like you said, it's like, okay, looking at real life scenario in your sport, how much are you doing whatever that agility drill is, type of thing. Yeah. The next one is butt kicks, and this is the warm up aspect of it, but also you mentioned in your content, you talked about butt kicking a little bit, but I think it was more so about the movement and less about the warm up.
So when I talk about butt kicking, I'm talking about butt kicking in a sprint, which is not what we want to do. We call it hip lift. A lot of people are going to call it knee drive. The reason we call it hip lift is just because it gives us a little more purpose behind what we teach and how we teach it. So I'm going to use the word hip lift. That means early activation at the hip, right? Obviously your knee's coming forward if you're doing it correct. If you're butt kicking, you are not doing hip lift. You are not getting everything front side. So butt kicking is something that we want to stay away from. Now with the drill, I never talk about the drill butt kicking because I would never use it, because I don't really find it to be relevant, because the things that it would be doing would be, again, moving, loosening up, ground contact, and I can think of a million other ways to do that are relevant and that don't require practicing a bad habit of kicking back.
Good. Okay. I like, because it's like literally every warm up I see, I'm pretty sure I see butt kicks in almost every warm up that I see, especially in football.
Mine. You've never seen mine then.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. And then what about running hills in general? And I know there's a few different pieces of this, so I'll let you unpack that one.
Again, a time and place, because it can beat you in. Do we need to be beaten, or do we need to work? It's just, again, understanding. Sometimes you do need to be beaten. There's a time and place for that too. But hill sprints are great, right? Going back to the butt kicking comment, I think that's a really good transition. You can't butt kick while you're running hills. So I think that it really helps you with form and getting your hips moving and getting your feet in the proper place. Like gravity is working against you. So I think that hill sprints can be a very good thing. Again, how are we using it? Is it so abused that it's a 20-second hill sprint? Now that's a conditioning, that's a whatever. This is a whole different combination or conversation. But when talking about hill sprints and talking about acceleration, there is a time and a place. But make sure that ultimately they can translate that back to the field. So after we do hill sprints, I want you to take what you just felt and translate that back to the field, just like any other drill.
Okay. Because, I see hill sprints. I mean, I remember even back in middle school, because we had a little field, or we had the field and then we had like a hill right next to it. And that was like a common thing, was we would have to run the hills for like it was more conditioning in that case.
Right.
But I've also, it's usually at the end of the workout that I see this. It's usually a 2-hour workout or practice, and then hills at the end.
That's again, to each their own. I don't know what the purpose of that section is. If I'm going to be doing hill sprints, because of just the the view I take on how to train, on how to perform, I would be doing hill sprints very early on because it's a teaching tool to sprint. But again, if I also need to end with conditioning because, and I don't do too much of that because I think that it's a pretty easy thing to do. But let's say that I do need to condition or condition my kids for whatever reason. You can use that as a tool and that's fine. That's okay. But I think that, and again, I can't talk for any coaches but me. It's like, what's the purpose of today's workout? And there can be multiple purposes. You can have conditioning at the end, but just understanding what's the purpose. Your experience growing up was anything like mine, I imagine there wasn't a lot of purpose. It was about running the kids. Right. Middle school, back when I was in middle school, it was about run those hills and be tired.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, definitely. And even now it's like there's still there's a hype about it. It is also about like who's going to get to the hill the fast or the top of the hill the fastest.
Right. And
but
good competition. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think like sometimes what I see is, again, you end up doing way more reps than you necessarily need to. Like, I guess I know it depends on the height of the hill, but on average, like how many reps or maybe how many minutes you think, like if it's more for, I guess, speed purposes, how long should that look like?
Well, if I was going to do it for speed purposes, I'm not going to use minutes because I'm fine with a long recovery. I don't care how slow you walk down. That's fine. True. But if we're talking about speed, I think the way that I would do that is doing probably 10 minutes of prep work on what are we practicing on the ground, moving into the hill. And that could be, that could simply be 3 reps. It could be 3 sets of 5. Like it really depends on what it looks like and what we're trying to accomplish. But then again, what I said for speed purposes, 3 sets of 5 sounds like a lot. And when I say even that's actually way too much for speed. Like, because I'm taking a long break in between. My goal is to be really like have 100% to give in each rep and do that 100%. And then again, after the hill, we're always translating that back to the playing field, the field, the court, whatever it is. Can we now use what we were looking for here with placement, with hip lift, all of these things, now translate that back to just flat ground?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about a lot of the what not to do's, and let's definitely get more into the what to do's. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to speed training, again, a lot of coaches, they talk about doing speed days and, doing these speed trainings. And then there's athletes who are like, yeah, I want to do speed training on my own, whatever it might be. You could break it down into different athletes or different sports. Mm-hmm. But what are some key drills that you would emphasize either for all athletes or for, specific sports?
So I think there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? But I think that some broad areas of make sure that you're getting this in is make sure you're getting in strength and stability. And when I talk about strength and stability, I mean it. I don't even mean you have to be inside the gym. Sometimes you don't have to do that. The gym is a great place at times, but you need to be moving in 3 dimensions. You need to be moving on one leg. You need to be moving, like crossing your body. And I think a lot of times when people think about strength, it's like how much can you squat, how much can you bench, how much weight are we moving? And that's not really it. Sometimes, again, some sports matter more, some positions in that sport matter more as well, but it's not always about how strong are your muscles, but it's also about how strong are your tendons and your tissues and your ligaments, because strength training, although it absolutely has its purpose back to being faster, jumping higher, being more powerful, a lot of times that's going to go back to keeping a strong, healthy athlete who's available. And so making sure that you are training, you are learning to absorb force, learning to land correctly, land from multiple angles, and progressive overload there, meaning making it harder and with some variable to an extent, so that way you can translate back to your playing field. I know that was very broad.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I know I have a decent amount of baseball athletes, families that listen to this. Mm-hmm. What would be some specific things that are unique maybe to, again, because their distance, all of their things are a little bit different. Like what would look different for, say, a baseball player?
And this is something I do with all my athletes, including even track. But, baseball is very much a rotational sport. It's making sure that your shoulders are healthy, but obviously we need to care about their ankles, their knees, their hips, all of that stuff too. So getting a lot of rotation in and building a strong base from the ground through your hips. And I think baseball players naturally are pretty good about that, because when you swing a bat, it starts with your feet in the ground, your hips got to
Yeah.
turn. Like, they're pretty good at that. But we still want to build in that direction, not just for power development, to hit harder, throw harder, but again, just to keep them healthy, because doing that repetitive motion can be very dangerous.
And then what about for, say, the soccer, the basketball, more of those, like you said, the ones who are going multiple directions, like all the time, basically? Like, what would be some key things or even some key drills that you like for that change of direction?
For the change of direction, again, it's learning how to stop quickly and efficiently from any direction, learning how to land. So when you think about soccer and basketball, you think ankles, knees, that's going to be a bigger issue than, baseball, softball, like shoulders. Obviously, there's translation across. You can see anything anywhere, but really, really learning how to land and how to stop. And then again, like for performance wise, starting soon. But a lot of the sport is played within 5 yards, right? And it's played in just a couple seconds at a time. And, of course, you need to be conditioned enough to make it through the entire game, but really hammering the specifics. So when I talk about, I know you wanted specific drills. When I talk about decelerating, I'm literally starting with one step. It's how can you do one step? Then how can you do 3 steps? And then how can you do that? And then pause and then go another way. And then how can you do that without the pause and go? It's just slowly building on. It's very, very simple what I'm doing, because that's what needs to translate. I'm not worried about how, like, what's the time from this cone through these 5 cones back here. I'm worried about how are you moving here and how quickly and efficiently and healthy are you doing this simple thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then doing
Okay.
that over and over, right? For the 90-minute game or the whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, like you said, 90-minute. I mean, some of them are in game like the entire time, or they play a whole 60-minute game or almost a whole game, and so it's like how can you do that sustainably for that long, for sure.
Right.
I was looking at your stuff, and it looks like some of your athletes are a bit younger. Like it looks like even like 9, 10, etc. Do you have like a age that you recommend athletes start learning sprint mechanics and agility, those types of things?
I think what people don't understand is that learning to be an athlete starts as a baby. When you're learning to crawl, when you're learning to walk, when you're learning to move, when you learn to fall, all of those things. People don't remember that. Now, when it comes to like having a coach and having a trainer, I don't necessarily think that there is a too early age to start, but again, making sure that it's age appropriate and understanding that a 6-year-old is going to want to have more fun than even a 10 or a 15-year-old, and matching them to where they're at. So I would not take a 6-year-old because I don't think that it would be worth it for them. I think that there's a better coach for a 6-year-old right now. And 9 or 10 is actually on the young side for where I'm at. If I'm bringing on a 10-year-old and having a conversation about what that looks like, they're typically pretty mature and high level, and they want to actually train, because I'm very education based, and 6-year-old doesn't care about that. Most 10-year-olds don't care about that. So I don't think that there's a black and white answer like, okay, well, you got to wait until this age. But it comes back to knowing your athlete and knowing that the coach that they're going to be working with, are they a good fit? And so I do take on a lot of 10-year-olds, but we have a long conversation before we get started, and we know that we're on the same page, and we're meeting them where they're at. That being said, I have some really mature 10-year-olds and some immature 16-year-olds sometimes.
Yep.
So you got to find like how advanced can you speak this language that we're teaching you. So again, not really one age. I don't think it can hurt if you have the right trainer, but it comes back to like, what are you looking for? Is that worth your time and money and effort right now? I know some parents want their kids just to work hard and be tired, and I'm not a good trainer for you, because I'm not going to just work them hard. I'm going to work them smart. And sometimes that's going really slow.
So that is something I saw a lot in your content too, is the working smarter, not harder type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, like, I guess we'll keep it open-ended. Let's speak to the athlete of why working smarter, not harder is important, and what that kind of looks like.
Because it goes back again to the goal. It's having a purpose in mind. So if your purpose is conditioning, sometimes you just got to work hard, right? So conditioning is hard, but it's knowing your goal that you started with. And I'm not going to get to this end goal by just working hard. Sure, you can work hard while you're being purposeful, but make sure that your path. Like, do you have a vision? Do you have a path? Are you following that? Sometimes it's not always the hardest worker. Sometimes it's somebody who can sit back and know that actually a rest day today would be in my best interest.
Yeah. Well, and that I feel like even ties to the maturity when we talk about the age thing, because that's part of with nutrition too, where I won't take any, like, I very rarely will take like a 10 or 11-year-old, but I've got to like talk to them a little bit and kind of gauge where are they at and what is their purpose of the nutrition. Like, it's like, okay, yes, we can start improving some of those habits, but does that look like coaching, or does that look like, me, providing some resources type of thing? And yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is a little bit different of a question, but I also think it's something that you speak to a bit is, the mental side of it. And I want to speak to the mental side specifically of speed, because number one, there are mental blocks when you look at, when you're doing jumping type stuff, like anything like jumping on a I've seen like, box jumps or a lot of those types of things that, like yesterday, I was watching my nephew does track, and there were some kids that did hurdles, and a couple of those kids ate it like pretty hard. And so it's like, I guess, can you speak to the mental side of speed sprints, whether, for the athlete, and like, what are some big things that you've learned over the years to help those athletes on the mental side of it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like having blocks or having a hurdle, literally or figuratively, in front of you, I think that if you're really struggling on a day, sometimes it's best to go backwards. Let's go backwards to another drill, or sometimes let's even just move away from it. You're not going to win every day. You're not. It's just not going to happen. And we've all had those days where some days you just have to call it a day. And then also recognize that you're doing the best thing for you. It's not like, oh man, I failed today. Like, no, today wasn't it. I'm just going to change the plan. And that's okay, because like I know I've talked about having a plan this whole time, but sometimes the plan needs to be changed. So being flexible and meeting yourself where you're at. And I think that girls who have, a cycle every single month, and we're going through a lot, not just like at any point in the month, there's always things going on, and girls especially need to be mindful of that. Sometimes you're going to need to stop because you're not going to get what you wanted to out of this session. And boys too, I'm not saying this is only a girl thing.
Oh yeah.
Some days you're just not going to get what you wanted to out of the session. And although we had this plan to come in and work hard and accomplish XYZ, maybe today is actually a recovery day. Let's change up the whole plan. Let's work on mobility. Let's work on, instead of speed, we're working on descent. Let's just change it up, or take one step back and maybe you can go forward. So the mental block, we're all going to have bad days, and sometimes those days last a little bit longer, but it's again meeting you where you're at. And I think to kind of stay on track, but like gear off another one, I think that athletes coming back from injuries, that could be really tough, where they want to get back and they want to get back quicker, and it feels like they feel behind and they feel like they just are itching to get back and all these things. And again, meeting yourself where you're at, because is training hard going to be the best thing for your longevity? Maybe, maybe not. Or maybe, well, if you're out for a month, or God forbid, 6 months or something, taking a time and looking at like the tactical side, studying the game, watching film, doing that sort of thing, and just finding other ways to feel like, oh, I worked today. And I've had athletes that come in and I'm like, oh my God, if I could do anything for you, I wish I could just make you stop working so hard. You're hurting yourself. Every once in a while, there's an athlete who just works too hard. So having that conversation with them and letting them know that it's okay. I know you feel like you want to check a box every day, and I love that about you. It is one of your greatest strengths, but it's also one of your greatest weaknesses. And so finding new ways to do that. And again, some of the training sessions, like some of my sessions, aren't that physically demanding. It's about changing patterns. Maybe that's good for you. Or maybe it is a study day and look at film day, and kind of getting them away from the same thing every single day.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you talk about like maybe it's not the right day to do. I mean, there's a lot that you said that was good right there. But one thing that stuck with me, because I've experienced this, is if it's not your day to do that specific thing, like, the speed stuff, it's like, okay, maybe you were sitting too much in class or whatever, your hip flexors are tight, and you need to like focus on, let's open those hip flexors up so that maybe tomorrow, so recovery, so that maybe tomorrow you can actually do it more effectively.
Exactly. We've all had those days, and sometimes you just gotta stop. I was a pole vaulter in college, actually,
Hmm.
and there'd be days that it's a pole vault day. I'm excited, right? These are my favorite days. I don't have to sprint. I don't have to do all the hard stuff. It's a pole vault day, and there have been days that it's like, well, you're not going into the pit, and so you're going to get hurt. And you can sit here in insanity doing the same thing over and over and over and sucking today and just making yourself madder at yourself and building more anxiety so that the next time you come back, you're thinking about all the bad reps. Or you can just stop and call it a day because you're not doing anything but practicing bad habits and building anxiety. And sometimes stopping is the best thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. To wrap up here, because I know we're hitting time, I know that there's a lot of things that you can speak to depending on the goals here, but I like to leave the final question to be more open ended and kind of give you an opportunity to speak to, hey, what did you not get a chance to share, anything like that. So like, if you were, say you're at their store and somebody recognizes you, some athletes like, hey, comes up to you, asks you like, hey, how can I get more explosive? How can I get more faster?
Mm-hmm.
And they've never done anything before, like what would you tell them?
Coming from doing nothing, I would say, I mean, train the basics and educate yourself. Like, understand what is your goal, and that can change so much. So it always starts with, I want to be faster, right? I play this sport and I just want to be faster. And then it's like, no, what does that look like? You want to be faster in 5 to 10 yards winning 50-50 balls. You want to be more agile. You want to jump high. Like, what is that? What are we talking about? And it can be multiple things. It can be a whole lot of things. So having that clear understanding of what is it, and then finding the right resources to get there. I brought on an older athlete. She's in her 40s and she's just serious about softball still, and I love that. And we were having that conversation, and she was talking about, because she's smart, she knows how to get on Google and look up these things, and she can discern what's good and bad. But something that I agree with her, there's so much information, and too much of a good thing is maybe not a good thing sometimes. So having, again, that direction, that path that you're following, because sometimes all of those things are great, but there's chaos, there's like no organization. So a little bit of structure sometimes, and having like, okay, this is the plan that we're on, we're going to follow this plan, instead of jumping from good advice to good advice to good advice with no structure.
I like that, because it's like a lot of us, we want to follow all the different motivational speakers or all the different speed coaches or all the different, whatever. And it's like, okay, I mean, even if it's good information, it's information overload. And it's like, if you can kind of fine tune, hey, who speaks to you the most? Like, somebody might like hear you and be like, oh, like that really, and I'm a visual. So, like content, great, because I can see it like with my own eyes versus if somebody is speaking. Some people would rather have recipes over like the other stuff. So it's like kind of where are you at and what you need to succeed.
Exactly. And having that conversation again and again, because where you're at today could be different than tomorrow, and certainly next year and 5 years down the road.
Yeah, definitely. Any last things in general that you want to leave listeners on around speed?
Something that we didn't really talk that much about is preventing injury. These kids are so overworked these days. So make sure that you're whenever you're going into a new program, that you're handling it appropriately and really actively doing things to stay strong. And again, when I talk about strong, it's not just muscles, tendons, tissues, ligaments, all of those things that can really hurt you.
Yeah. I know that's a big one, and recovery. Yeah, definitely a big one. I have a physical therapist sometimes on the podcast, and I realize it's been a while since I've had one of those. So that cues up like, hey, we got to get the ACL guy back in. We got to get like one of those in to be like, yeah, let's unpack that a little more.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. Well, Laura, thanks so much for hopping on today. And then listeners, make sure that you're checking her content. Her links are in the show notes or in the caption down below. But yeah, Laura, thanks so much for hopping on.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. And for listeners, if you enjoyed the podcast, remember the best way for others to benefit. If you want your team to succeed, then they need to be listening to this stuff as well. So make sure you share it with them, like, subscribe, share, all those things. And as always, keep striving for greatness.